At dawn, the deputy sheriff knocked with an eviction notice. My son-in-law stood across the yard, grinning and yelling, "Your time is up. The house is ours now." I stayed perfectly calm and asked, "Who signed this garbage?" The deputy scanned the page, froze, and his mouth fell open in shock. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Saul Garrett. I'm 68 years old, and I've spent the last 3 years of retirement in my house on Oakwood Drive in Austin, Texas. Before that, I wore the black robe for 30 years as a county circuit judge. You learn to read people in that job, every twitch, every hesitation, every lie poorly told. I thought I'd seen it all. Turns out I hadn't seen anything yet. My daughter Tara used to be different. I remember her at 7, running to me after school with drawings she'd made, insisting I hang them in my office at the courthouse. She'd sit on my lap while I reviewed case files, asking endless questions about justice and fairness. "Daddy, how do you know who's telling the truth?" she'd ask. I'd tell her the truth reveals itself if you pay attention to the details. Everything changed when she married Kevin Morgan 3 years ago. At first, I tried to be diplomatic about it. Kevin had charm, the surface kind that works on people who don't look too closely. He talked big about business ventures and investment opportunities, always wearing expensive watches and driving cars he clearly couldn't afford. Tara seemed happy, though, so I kept my observations to myself. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was trusting my daughter when she started visiting more frequently 6 months ago. She'd drop by with papers, asking me to sign tax documents or estate planning updates. I'm a judge, was a judge, and I should have read every word. But she was my daughter, my only child. So I'd glance at the headers, see official-looking letterhead, and sign where she pointed. Kevin would hover nearby, always checking his phone, always asking casual questions about my savings, my retirement accounts, the house's value. I noticed things, of course. The way Tara's eyes would flicker toward Kevin before she answered any of my questions. How she'd shifted from calling me Dad to the more distant father. The expensive handbag she carried that cost more than most people's mortgage payments. But I'm 68, not senile, and I've sentenced enough con artists to recognize the pattern. I just never thought I'd see it in my own living room. The morning it all came apart started like any other Tuesday. I was in my garage workshop, sanding down a Victorian-era writing desk I'd been restoring for months, when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Then came the knock, official, measured, the kind law enforcement learns at the academy. I opened the door to find a deputy sheriff standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable in the early June heat. He was young, maybe mid-30s, with the rigid posture of someone who takes his job seriously. "Sir, I'm Deputy Marcus Wade. I'm here to serve you with an eviction notice." For a moment, I just stared at him. Then I saw them, Kevin and Tara, standing beside their car across the street. Kevin had his phone out, recording. When he saw me looking, he grinned and shouted loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "Your time's up, old man. The house is ours now." Tara stood beside him, saying nothing. She wouldn't even look at me. I turned back to Deputy Wade, keeping my voice level. "May I see the documents, please?" He handed me a manila folder, his expression apologetic. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." "I understand, Deputy." I opened the folder and felt everything inside me go cold. It was a quitclaim deed, supposedly signed by me, transferring full ownership of 2,847 Oakwood Drive to Tara Garrett Morgan. Dated April 15th. Notarized. Everything looked official. Everything except 3 things that screamed fraud to anyone who knew what to look for. First, the seal. It was positioned at a 15-degree angle. I'd been signing legal documents for 3 decades, and I never, not once, placed my seal anywhere but perpendicular to my signature line. Second, the signature itself. Close, but not quite right. The loop on my G was too wide, and I always crossed my T's with a slight upward flourish. This didn't have it. Third, the seal was my old one. I'd updated my official seal 18 months ago after moving my home office. This was the design I'd stopped using in late 2023. I looked up at Deputy Wade, really looked at him for the first time. His face was familiar in that way young faces sometimes are when you've been in public service long enough. Then it clicked. Marcus Wade, I said slowly. You interned at the courthouse, Judge Patterson's office, summer of 2017. His eyes widened. Judge Garrett? Sir, I didn't realize. You attended my retirement ceremony 8 years later, I continued, my mind already 3 steps ahead. You gave a very gracious speech about how my mentorship program helped you decide to pursue law enforcement instead of law school. The blood drained from his face as he understood what he'd just walked into. Across the street, Kevin had stopped recording, sensing something was wrong. Deputy Wade, I need you to wait here for just 1 moment. Don't go anywhere. I walked back into my house, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. In my office, my real office, the one I've maintained since retirement, I kept copies of every important document related to this property. I pulled out the folder containing the original deed, my updated SIL impression, and my actual signature from recent bank documents. When I returned to the porch, Marcus was still standing there, but now he looked like a man who'd realized he was about to be part of something much bigger than a routine eviction. I handed him my folder. Compare these documents, Deputy. Pay special attention to the seal placement and signature formation. I spent 30 years examining fraudulent documents in my courtroom. This, I tapped the eviction notice, is amateur work. Marcus studied both sets of documents. I watched his jaw tighten as he saw what I'd seen immediately. Across the street, Kevin was walking toward us now, Tara trailing behind him. What's the holdup? He called out. Just drag the old man out already. I ignored him. Instead, I looked at Marcus and spoke clearly, making sure my voice would carry. This is fraud, Deputy Wade. Document forgery, and I intend to prove it. Marcus Wade stood on my porch for a long moment, the 2 folders in his hands. One real, one fake. I could see him processing it all, the implications spreading across his face like ripples on water. Sir, I apologize for this situation, he finally said. Given the circumstances, I strongly advise you to contact an attorney immediately. This matter requires investigation. Kevin had reached the edge of my yard by then, his face twisted with frustration. Hey, you can't just ignore official paperwork. We have every right. Step back, sir. Marcus's voice cut through Kevin's bluster with the authority of someone who'd had enough. This situation is now under review. Any interference will result in your removal from the premises. Tara tried next, her voice taking on that pleading tone I'd heard 1,000 times when she was a child, asking for something she wanted. Daddy, please, can we just talk inside? This is all a misunderstanding. No, Tara. I kept my voice flat, emotionless. There's nothing to discuss. Marcus nodded at me, then at Kevin and Tara. I'll be filing a report about these discrepancies. You'll all be contacted. He walked back to his patrol car, and I watched Kevin's confidence crumble with every step the deputy took. After Marcus drove away, I expected them to leave. Instead, Tara approached my front door, tears streaming down her face. Real tears, too. She always could cry on command. Dad, please, she sobbed. This is all Kevin's fault. He said it was just paperwork. I didn't know. I looked past her tears, past the performance, to what she was holding. A brand new iPhone 15 Pro, the titanium case catching the morning sun. Those retail for about $1,200. And on the screen, clearly visible before she noticed me looking and tilted it away, was a confirmation email. Your flight to Paris. $8,400 for 2 passengers. $8,400 for a vacation while trying to steal my house. Go home, Tara. But Daddy, I said go home. I stepped back and closed the door, locked it, stood there listening to her cry on my porch for another minute before Kevin called her back to the car. Only when I heard them drive away did I allow myself to feel it, the full weight of what my daughter had tried to do. I walked through my house, this house I'd bought 40 years ago when Tara was still a dream, when my wife was alive and the world made sense. Every room held memories. The kitchen where we'd baked birthday cakes, the living room where Tara learned to walk, stumbling between the couch and coffee table while we cheered her on, the backyard where I'd pushed her on the swing set until my arms ached. When had it changed? I forced myself to think back, to really examine the past 6 months. Tara's first visit after the long silence had been in January. She'd shown up on a Sunday afternoon with apology cookies from that bakery downtown, the expensive one. I'm sorry we haven't been around more, Dad, she'd said, settling onto the couch like old times. Kevin's been so busy with his startup, and I've been helping him, and time just got away from us. I'd been so happy to see her that I hadn't questioned it, hadn't wondered why, after 2 years of barely speaking to me, she'd suddenly remembered I existed. The second visit came a week later. Dad, I was thinking about your estate planning. You've got everything organized, right? Just want to make sure you're protected. She'd had papers with her that time, forms about power of attorney, trust documents, beneficiary updates. I'd glanced at the headers. They looked legitimate, and signed where she indicated. The third visit, Kevin had come along. He'd wandered through my house with the casual entitlement of someone evaluating property. This place has got to be worth, what, 800 grand? Maybe 9? He'd asked. Prime Austin real estate. You ever think about downsizing Saul? All this space for one person seems wasteful. I'd laughed it off then, made a joke about them prying my house keys from my cold, dead hands. Kevin had laughed too, but his eyes hadn't. Now I understood. Every visit, every document, every casual question, they'd been building toward this. The forged deed was just the final piece. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. Robert Elliott, a fellow judge who'd retired the same year I did. He answered on the third ring. Saul Garrett, to what do I owe this rare pleasure? Robert, I need a recommendation. Best real estate attorney in Austin. Someone who handles fraud cases. There was a pause. What kind of fraud are we talking about? The kind involving forged property deeds and family members who think a retired judge won't notice amateur hour. Another pause, longer this time. Gerald Castillo. He's expensive, but he's worth every penny. Handles this kind of thing regularly. I'll text you his number. Thanks, Robert. Saul, whatever's happening, be careful. Family cases get messy? I hung up and looked at my house again. My house. The one I'd paid off 15 years ago through careful planning and living below my means. The one where I'd raised my daughter, taught her right from wrong, showed her what integrity looked like, and she'd tried to steal it. I felt something shift inside me then, a cold clarity I recognized from my years on the bench, the transformation from victim to strategist. I'd spent 3 decades watching people try to game the system, manipulate the law, exploit loopholes. I'd seen every trick, every scheme, every desperate play. They wanted to play legal games with a judge who'd spent 30 years dealing with fraud cases? I almost smiled. All right then, I said quietly to my empty living room, to the house that was still mine, to the future I was about to reclaim. Let's see how this plays out. The next morning I had my first appointment with Gerald Castillo. His office occupied the 5th floor of a glass building on Congress Avenue, the kind of place that charged by the square foot. The receptionist offered coffee while I waited, which I accepted. Professional courtesy, even when your world is burning down. Gerald himself was younger than I expected, maybe 52, with the kind of calm competence that comes from handling difficult cases without drama. We shook hands, and he gestured me to a leather chair across from his desk. Judge Garrett, Robert Elliott spoke highly of you. Just Saul now, I said. Haven't worn the robe in 3 years. Once a judge, always a judge in my book. He opened the folder I'd sent ahead. I've reviewed the documents you scanned over. This is quitclaim deed fraud, clear as day. Walk me through what happened. I laid out the timeline methodically, a habit from years of examining testimony. The visits from Tara, Kevin's questions. The morning Deputy Wade appeared at my door. When I described spotting the forged SIL angle and outdated design, Gerald leaned forward. You caught that immediately? I signed thousands of documents over 30 years. You develop a sense for these things. He smiled, the kind of smile lawyers give when they realize they're working with someone who understands the game. This makes my job considerably easier. The deed is dated April 15th, allegedly notarized by Lisa Patterson. Have you contacted her? Not yet. Thought I'd wait for professional guidance. Smart. Let's visit her together this afternoon. If the notarization is legitimate, we have one problem. If it's forged, or if the document was switched, we have a criminal case. 3 hours later, we sat in Lisa Patterson's modest office on San Jacinto Boulevard. She was a woman in her early 50s who'd been notarizing documents in Travis County for 20 years. She knew me by reputation, though we'd never worked together directly. When Gerald showed her the quitclaim deed, she put on reading glasses and studied it carefully. "That's my seal," she said slowly. "Or rather, it looks like my seal. But—" She turned to her computer, pulling up her digital records. "April 15th. Yes, I notarized a document that day for Tara Morgan, but it was a power of attorney, not a quitclaim deed." The silence in that office felt heavy. "You're certain?" Gerald asked. "Absolutely. I log every document. Look, here's my entry. Power of attorney for medical decisions. Standard form. She said it was in case her father had a health emergency and needed someone to make decisions." Lisa's face had gone pale. "Someone used my seal on a different document? Or switched the documents after you notarized one of them?" Gerald said. "Either way, this is forgery." We left with a sworn statement from Lisa and copies of her records. In Gerald's car, I stared out the window at Austin traffic, my mind working through the implications. "They planned this for months," I said. "Every visit, every paper she asked me to sign, they were setting up the infrastructure." "Most fraud happens over time," Gerald agreed. "The question is what else they might have attempted. I'd recommend hiring a private investigator to dig into Kevin and Tara's finances. If they're desperate enough to forge property documents, there's usually more beneath the surface." He gave me a name, Veronica Fields, former FBI, now private sector, specializing in financial investigations. Her retainer was $5,000, which I paid that evening via bank transfer. 2 days later, Veronica sat in my living room, a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s, who carried herself like someone who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and remained unimpressed. "Mr. Garrett, I've done preliminary research on Kevin Morgan and your daughter Tara. Before I go deeper, you should know that investigations like this sometimes reveal uncomfortable truth. I've been a judge for 30 years, Ms. Fields. I've heard uncomfortable truths before breakfast. What did you find?" She opened her laptop. "Kevin Morgan lists himself as a tech entrepreneur, claims to run an investment platform called Dream Chain. It's registered as an LLC, but there's no actual business activity, no employees, no office, no product. What there is, however, is a pattern of cash deposits from multiple individuals ranging from $15,000 to $75,000 each." "How much total?" "Best estimate, over $500,000 in the past 18 months. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "And what is he doing with this money?" "Living well beyond his means. He leases a Tesla Model S, rents a luxury apartment downtown for $4,200 a month, takes frequent trips to Europe. Your daughter's credit card statements show similar patterns. High-end shopping, expensive restaurants. They're running a con. That would be my assessment. The technical term is Ponzi scheme, though this one hasn't reached the stage where it collapses spectacularly. My guess is Kevin's getting pressure from his investors, which is why he needs your house. An asset worth $890,000 would buy him breathing room." After Veronica left, I walked through my house again, seeing it differently now. This wasn't just my home. To Kevin and Tara, it was an escape hatch, a way to pay off angry investors and disappear to Europe with my daughter on my money, leaving me with nothing. The casual cruelty of it was almost impressive. I stood in my workshop, running my hand over the Victorian writing desk I'd been restoring. The wood was bird's-eye maple, warped from decades of moisture damage, but underneath the damage you could still see the craftsman's original intent. Beautiful work, just neglected. Some things could be restored. Others needed to be discarded. My phone rang. Veronica. "Mr. Garrett, one more thing. If they've gone this far with forgery, this probably isn't their first attempt to deceive you. I can do a comprehensive audit, bank records, property filings, anything with your name on it. But it'll take time. A week, maybe more." I looked at the forged deed sitting on my workbench, with its wrong seal angle and copied signature. "Take the time, Ms. Fields. I want to know everything." "Understood. I'll be in touch." After I hung up, I realized I was smiling. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile I used to have in court when a defendant's lawyer made a critical mistake and didn't realize it yet. Kevin and Tara thought they were playing chess with someone who didn't know the rules. They had no idea I'd spent 3 decades watching people try to game the system, learning every trick, every tell, every desperate move. And now I was going to teach them what happens when you underestimate a judge. A week passed. I spent it going through every document in my house, every statement, every paper Tara had asked me to sign over the past 6 months. Gerald Castillo had given me a checklist: power of attorney forms, beneficiary changes, property liens, anything that could transfer assets or create legal obligations. I found 3 documents I didn't remember signing. 2 were legitimate, actual tax forms that Tara had explained correctly. The third was another power of attorney, this one for financial decisions, dated 3 months prior. My signature looked genuine, but I had no memory of it. It's possible she had you sign it mixed in with other papers, Gerald explained when I brought it to his office. People do it all the time. Bury the important document in a stack of routine ones. You're reviewing 20 pages of tax forms. You stop reading carefully after page 5. Can we revoke it? Already done. I filed the revocation this morning. She no longer has any legal authority over your affairs. That was when Veronica called with her full report. We met at a coffee shop near the lake, away from offices and potential eavesdroppers. She slid a thick folder across the table. Everything you need to know about Kevin Morgan's financial situation. Short version, he's drowning. I opened the folder. The first page showed a summary that made my jaw tighten. Total debt, $520,000. Dream Chain promised investors a 200% return in 12 months, Veronica explained. Kevin took their money and spent it. There's no cryptocurrency platform. There never was. He's been paying early investors with money from new investors. Classic Ponzi structure. But he's running out of new investors, and the deadline for returns is coming up fast. 3 weeks from now, actually. What happens then? His investors start asking questions. Some of them are already getting nervous. I found email exchanges where Kevin's making excuses, asking for extensions. She flipped to another page. Here's where it gets worse. Your daughter Tara has been actively involved. She opened 3 credit cards 3 months ago using this house as collateral, which is illegal without your permission, but the banks didn't verify. She's maxed out all 3. Total debt, $67,000. Spending it on what? Luxury goods, mostly. Handbags, jewelry, first-class flights. She's living like someone who expects a major payday soon. Veronica's expression was carefully neutral. I also found evidence Kevin's been meeting with potential buyers for this property. He's offering it at $850,000, $40,000 below market value for a quick sale. The picture became crystal clear. They'd forge the deed, sell my house within a month, use the money to pay off Kevin's angry investors, cover Tara's credit cards, and disappear to Europe. I'd be left homeless, penniless, and by the time I proved the deed was forged, they'd be long gone. There's one more thing, Veronica said quietly. I pulled Kevin's phone records, legally through a contact at one of the creditor companies investigating him. He's been in regular contact with someone named Daniel Shaw. Shaw runs a consulting business that specializes in complex family financial situations. Translation: he teaches people how to exploit their relatives. I closed the folder and looked out at the lake. Sailboats drifted across the water, people enjoying a beautiful Austin afternoon, completely unaware that a few feet away, someone was learning the full extent of his daughter's betrayal. What would you advise? I asked. Legally, you have enough for a civil case. Fraud, forgery, financial exploitation. Gerald can get the deed invalidated and probably win damages. Criminally, that's harder. You'd need the DA's office to pursue charges, and family cases get complicated. What if it's not just about getting my house back? Veronica studied me. Then you're talking about something bigger, making sure they can't do this to someone else, making sure there are consequences. Exactly, she leaned back. In that case, you need a different strategy, one that addresses both the fraud against you and Kevin's broader con. But that takes time and coordination. When I got home, Gerald was waiting on my porch. We'd scheduled a meeting to discuss next steps. Inside, I spread Veronica's report across my dining table. Gerald read through it in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. This is worse than I thought, he finally said. Kevin's not just committing fraud against you, he's running a full-scale investment scam. If we pursue this correctly, we're looking at criminal charges that go far beyond a forged deed. What do you recommend? File a civil suit immediately to invalidate the quitclaim deed and block any sale of the property. Simultaneously, I can refer this information to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. The forgery alone is a felony. Add in the investment fraud, and Kevin's looking at serious prison time. I thought about it. The easy path was right there. File the lawsuit, get my house back, let the criminal justice system handle the rest. Clean, simple, over in a few months. But something in me resisted. Maybe it was 30 years of watching criminals slip through cracks in the system. Maybe it was the image of Tara's face when she'd tried to manipulate me with fake tears, while holding an expensive phone and European vacation confirmations. Maybe it was just old-fashioned anger at being treated like a fool. No, I said. Gerald looked up. No? If we just file the civil suit, Kevin and Tara will see it coming. They'll lawyer up, start hiding assets, maybe even run. The criminal case could take years, and they might get plea deals. I met his eyes. I want them to face full consequences, not just for what they did to me, but for every investor Kevin defrauded. I want this airtight. That's a more complex approach. It requires coordination, patience, perfect timing. I've got plenty of patience, and as for timing, I smiled slightly. I spent 30 years managing court schedules. I think I can handle this. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Step 1. File the civil lawsuit to establish the legal record and prevent property sale. Step 2. Have Veronica continue investigating Kevin's investors, building a comprehensive case. Step 3. Wait for Kevin to make mistakes, which desperate people always do. After Gerald left, I sat in my workshop again, this time actually working on the Victorian desk, sanding away decades of damage, revealing the beautiful wood underneath. It was meditative work, the kind that lets your mind wander productively. I thought about Kevin and Tara, so certain they'd outsmarted an old man. They'd seen my age, my retirement, my trust in family, and thought it made me weak. They forgot I'd spent 30 years in a courtroom, 30 years watching people lie, scheme, and manipulate, 30 years learning how the legal system works, where its power lies, how to use it properly. I set down the sandpaper and picked up the forged deed one more time, studying Kevin's amateur attempt at my signature, and that's when I understood exactly how to repay them, not with anger or revenge, but with the one thing I'd dedicated my career to, justice. Gerald and I spent the next 3 days crafting a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. 3 stages, each one designed to tighten the noose, while giving Kevin and Tara just enough rope to hang themselves. Stage 1. File a civil lawsuit to invalidate the quitclaim deed and block any sale of the property. This would be our opening move, loud, public, and impossible to ignore. Stage 2. Gather comprehensive evidence of Kevin's financial crimes for the district attorney. Document every dollar, every lie, every investor he'd defrauded. Build a case so airtight that plea bargains would be off the table. Stage 3. Request a property lien to prevent any attempted sale while the case proceeded. This would cut off Kevin's escape route completely. The key, Gerald explained, spreading documents across his conference table, is timing. We file everything simultaneously so they can't react fast enough to hide assets or flee. When do we start? I can have the paperwork ready by the end of the week. The question is whether you're certain about this path. Once we file, there's no turning back. This becomes public record. I thought about Tara's fake tears, her expensive phone, those European flight confirmations, about Kevin's smug face when Deputy Wade had shown up at my door, about the $890,000 they'd planned to steal while leaving me homeless. File it. 2 weeks after my initial meeting with Gerald, we walked into the Travis County District Court and submitted the lawsuit. The clerk stamped it with that satisfying thunk of official business being conducted. I was suing my daughter and son-in-law for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft of property. The judge assigned to the case was Daniel Hudson, 53 years old, 15 years on the bench. I'd never worked with him directly, but I knew his reputation. Fair, thorough, no patience for nonsense. Exactly what I needed. His clerk called the next day. Preliminary hearings scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Gerald requested and received an emergency temporary restraint on the property, preventing any transfer of ownership. Kevin's escape hatch had just slammed shut. While we waited for the hearing date, Veronica continued her investigation. She called one evening while I was in my workshop, the phone buzzing against the workbench. "I found something interesting," she said without preamble. "Kevin's been in regular contact with someone named Daniel Shaw. He runs a consulting business, Strategic Family Asset Management." I looked into Shaw's client list. Every single one has been involved in elder fraud cases. He teaches people how to steal from their families? Essentially, yes. And he's very good at staying just on the legal side of the line. He doesn't commit crimes himself. He just advises others how to do it. Kevin's paid him over $15,000 in the past 6 months. I leaned back in my chair, processing this. So this wasn't just Kevin being desperate. He had professional help. Correct, which actually works in our favor. It establishes premeditation. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment mistake. It was a calculated, planned attack. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet workshop, listening to the sounds of my neighborhood settling in for the evening. Somewhere nearby, someone was grilling dinner. A dog barked. Normal life continuing while mine had become a legal battlefield. But for the first time since Deputy Wade knocked on my door, I felt something like satisfaction. Kevin and Tara thought they'd planned everything perfectly. They had no idea they'd left a trail of evidence wide enough to drive a truck through. The weekend before the hearing, I drove past Kevin and Tara's apartment, the luxury place downtown that cost $4,200 a month. The Tesla was parked in front, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Through the first-floor windows, I could see expensive furniture, designer lighting, all the trappings of success funded by other people's money. I didn't stop, just drove past slowly, memorizing the scene. In a few days, all of this would start crumbling. On the morning of the hearing, I put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one I'd worn to important court dates for 3 decades. Gerald met me on the courthouse steps. "Ready?" he asked. "I spent 30 years walking into courtrooms. This is just another Tuesday." But as we walked through those familiar hallways, past courtrooms where I'd once presided, I felt the weight of what we were doing. This wasn't just another case. This was my daughter, my only child. Then I remembered her face outside my house, crying fake tears while holding that expensive phone. I remembered Kevin's voice. "Your time's up, old man." My resolve hardened. We entered the courtroom 10 minutes early. Kevin and Tara arrived 5 minutes later, and they weren't alone. With them was a man I recognized immediately. Curtis Ryder, one of Austin's most aggressive defense attorneys, the kind who used every trick, every loophole, every dirty tactic to win. Ryder spotted me and smiled, the predatory kind that never reaches the eyes. He walked over, his expensive Italian shoes clicking on the courtroom floor. "Saul Garrett," he said, extending a hand I didn't take. "Curtis Ryder, I'm representing the Morgans in this unfortunate matter." "Mr. Ryder," I kept my voice flat, neutral. "I'll be honest with you, Saul. You're going to lose this case. We have your signature, we have notarization, we have proper documentation. My clients legally own that property." He glanced back at Kevin and Tara, who were watching with badly concealed smugness. "Save yourself the legal fees and the embarrassment. Withdraw the suit, and we'll discuss terms for your continued residence, maybe as a tenant." I met his eyes and let him see nothing. No anger, no fear, no reaction at all. "See you in court, Mr. Ryder." His smile faltered just slightly before he walked back to his clients. I watched Kevin lean in, whispering something. They both laughed, but it sounded hollow in the high-ceilinged room. Gerald touched my elbow. "Don't let him get to you. Ryder's trying to shake your confidence." "I know. I've seen the tactic 1,000 times from this bench." "Good, because we're about to show him what happens when you bring amateur hour fraud into a real courtroom." The bailiff called us to order. Judge Hudson entered, and everyone stood. When we sat, I felt the familiar weight of judicial proceedings settling over the room. This was my element. This was where truth emerged from lies, where evidence spoke louder than bluster. Kevin and Tara sat across the aisle, both dressed like they were attending a business meeting, professional, respectable, innocent. Tara even managed to look sad, like this whole thing pained her. I almost laughed. Almost, Judge Hudson reviewed the case summary, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Finally, he looked up. This is a preliminary hearing regarding allegations of document forgery and fraud. Mr. Ryder, your clients are the defendants in this matter? Yes, Your Honor, and I'd like to state for the record that this lawsuit is frivolous and based on misunderstandings. You'll have your chance to present, Mr. Ryder. Mr. Castillo, you're representing the plaintiff? Gerald stood. Yes, Your Honor. Then let's proceed. Ryder went first as defendant's counsel in a civil case. He stood with theatrical confidence, painting a picture of devoted family members trying to help an aging patriarch. Your Honor, this case is a tragic example of elderly confusion leading to family conflict. My clients, Kevin and Tara Morgan, only wanted to assist Mr. Garrett with his estate planning. The quitclaim deed in question was signed willingly by Mr. Garrett as part of that planning. Now, suffering from understandable age-related memory issues, he's forgotten this transaction and is accusing his own daughter of fraud. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was cataloging every word, age-related memory issues. This was his angle. We have Mr. Garrett's signature, properly notarized by Lisa Patterson, a licensed notary with 20 years of experience. We have the original document, filed and recorded with the county. Everything was done legally and properly. This lawsuit is nothing more than an elderly man's confusion, unfortunately encouraged by lawyers who should know better. He sat down, looking satisfied. Kevin nodded slightly, and Tara dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd pulled from nowhere. Judge Hudson turned to Gerald. Mr. Castillo? Gerald stood, and I recognized the shift in his posture, from casual to predatory. He'd been waiting for this. Your Honor, the defendant's counsel presents a touching story. Unfortunately for his clients, it's fiction. He opened his briefcase. I'd like to submit 3 pieces of evidence for the court's review. He approached the bench with documents I knew by heart. We'd gone over them a dozen times. First, an expert analysis from Thomas Wheeler, a certified forensic document examiner with 28 years of experience. Mr. Wheeler examined the signature on the quitclaim deed and compared it to known samples of Mr. Garrett's authentic signature. His conclusion, the signature is forged, with 97% certainty. Ryder shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. We haven't had the opportunity to examine this expert's credentials. Mr. Wheeler's credentials are attached to his report, Mr. Ryder. Sit down. Judge Hudson was already reading the analysis, his expression growing colder with each page. Gerald continued. Second, a sworn affidavit from Lisa Patterson, the notary whose seal appears on the document. Ms. Patterson confirms that on the date in question, she notarized a power of attorney for medical decisions, not a quitclaim deed. Someone either switched documents after notarization or forged her seal onto a different document entirely. I watched Kevin's face. The color was draining from it slowly, like water leaving a bathtub. Beside him, Tara had stopped dabbing her eyes. Third, photographic evidence showing that the seal impression on the quitclaim deed is from Mr. Garrett's old seal, a design he stopped using 18 months ago when he updated his home office. The seal on the fraudulent document is from 2023. The alleged signing date is 2025. The seal couldn't have been used to sign a 2025 document because it no longer existed. Judge Hudson looked up from the documents. His expression could have frozen lava. Mr. Ryder, do you have any response to these allegations? Ryder stood, but for the first time since I'd seen him, he looked uncertain. Your Honor, we'll need time to review this evidence and respond appropriately. I'm sure you will, but right now I'm looking at evidence of what appears to be document forgery and fraud. Mr. Castillo, what is your client requesting? Gerald didn't hesitate. A temporary restraining order preventing any sale or transfer of the property at 2847 Oakwood Drive, pending full investigation. Additionally, we request that this matter be referred to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Granted on both counts. Hudson's gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. This property is frozen pending resolution of this case. Main hearing is scheduled for 5 weeks from today. Mr. Ryder, I strongly suggest you review your client's position. If this evidence holds up, they're looking at criminal charges. This preliminary hearing is adjourned." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Kevin had gone from pale to white as paper. Tara was gripping his arm, her knuckles bloodless. Ryder was gathering papers with hands that shook just slightly, enough for me to notice. As we filed out of the courtroom, I walked past Kevin and Tara. They were standing in a tight huddle with Ryder, whose aggressive confidence had evaporated like morning dew. I stopped, let them see me looking, let them wonder. Then I leaned in, just close enough that only Kevin could hear me. My voice was barely a whisper. "Who signed that garbage, Kevin? Did you take my seal from my office? I wonder what else you took while you were in there." Kevin's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping on a dock, and I had to work to keep the satisfaction off my face. Because in that moment, Kevin realized something. I might know more than he thought. Every document he'd touched, every paper Tara had asked me to sign, every time he'd wandered through my house asking questions, I might have records of all of it. He had no idea what I actually knew, and that uncertainty would eat at him. Tara grabbed his arm. "Kevin? What did he say? Kevin?" But Kevin couldn't answer. He just stared at me as I walked away, Gerald at my side. Outside the courthouse, in the bright Austin sunshine, Gerald allowed himself a small smile. "That went well. It's just the opening move. True? But did you see Ryder's face when I presented the SEAL evidence? I thought he was going to choke." I did smile then. Years of aggressive tactics, and he walked right into basic forensic evidence. He underestimated us. They all did? That's going to cost them everything. As we walked to the parking lot, I thought about Kevin's face. The shock, the fear, the dawning realization that his perfect plan was collapsing. It was the most satisfying thing I'd seen in weeks, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. The day after the preliminary hearing, Veronica called with an update that would change everything. "I've traced Kevin's debt back to its source," she said. "It's worse than we thought." We met at her office downtown, a modest space with file cabinets lining every wall. She spread documents across her desk. Bank statements, transfer records, email printouts, investment contracts. Kevin Morgan has been running a Ponzi scheme for the past 18 months. He calls it Dream Chain, supposedly a revolutionary cryptocurrency investment platform that would double investors' money in 12 months. I picked up one of the contracts. The promises were absurd, guaranteed 200% returns, backed by proprietary blockchain technology and AI-driven trading algorithms. Standard con artist vocabulary designed to impress people who didn't understand the technology. How much did he collect? $520,000 from 14 investors, professionals mostly, doctors, lawyers, small business owners, people with disposable income who wanted to get in on the crypto boom. Veronica pulled up a spreadsheet on her computer. But there is no Dream Chain platform. Never was. Kevin took their money and spent it. The spreadsheet told the story in brutal clarity. $89,000 for a Tesla Model S, monthly apartment rent of $4,200 for a luxury place in downtown Austin, European vacations, Paris, Rome, Barcelona, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, country club memberships. "He's been living like a tech millionaire on other people's investments," I said. "Classic Ponzi structure. He paid early investors small returns using money from new investors, which kept them happy and generated positive word of mouth. But he couldn't sustain it. The deadline for the full returns was early last month, and now investors are asking questions." Veronica flipped to another document, an email chain between Kevin and 3 increasingly angry investors. The tone progressed from polite inquiry to veiled threats, to outright demands for their money back or they'd contact authorities. "This is why he needed your house so desperately," Veronica continued. $890,000 would have covered his debts with room to spare. He could have paid off the investors, disappeared to Europe with Tara, started over somewhere else. I sat back, processing the full scope of what Kevin and my daughter had attempted. This wasn't just fraud against me. It was a criminal enterprise that had victimized 14 people, destroying their trust and stealing their savings. "Can we use this?" I asked. Veronica smiled. "I've already prepared a complete financial analysis. Every dollar Kevin collected, every dollar he spent, documented with bank records and receipts. It's a prosecutor's dream case. And Tara. She's been involved from the start. Her name appears on several of the Dream Chain promotional materials as Director of Client Relations. She attended investor meetings, reassured people when they got nervous. She knew exactly what Kevin was doing. That hurt worse than I expected. My daughter hadn't just been a passive accomplice. She'd actively recruited victims. "There's one more thing," Veronica said. "One of Kevin's investors is Robert Meyer, a retired prosecutor who used to work in the Travis County DA's office. He invested $75,000. A retired prosecutor. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so tragic. What if someone told Meyer the truth? I asked carefully. Showed him the evidence of what Kevin really did with his money? Veronica's expression didn't change, but her eyes gleamed. Hypothetically, if someone provided Meyer with comprehensive documentation of the fraud, he would probably feel obligated to report it to his former colleagues. Prosecutors tend to take financial crimes personally, especially when they're victims. Hypothetically. Of course. 2 days later, Veronica delivered an anonymous package to Robert Meyer's home. Inside was everything: bank records, email chains, the fake Dream Chain contracts, documentation of Kevin's spending, the whole sordid story. Meyer's response was swift. Within 72 hours, he'd contacted the Texas Attorney General's Securities Division. The following week, an official investigation was opened into Kevin Morgan and Dream Chain. I learned about it when Gerald called, his voice barely containing excitement. "The state is pursuing Kevin for securities fraud. This is separate from our civil case. It's a criminal investigation. If they find what I think they'll find, Kevin's looking at serious prison time." "How serious?" "Securities fraud in Texas, with amounts over $500,000. We're talking years, not months." That evening I was in my workshop when my phone rang. Tara's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Tara." "Dad?" Her voice was high, panicked, all the previous fake sweetness stripped away by genuine terror. "We need help. These men came to our apartment today, agents from some securities commission. They had questions about Kevin's business. They wanted to see records. They kept asking about investors." "I see." "Dad, please. They're talking about criminal charges. Kevin could go to prison. You're a judge. You know these people. You can help us?" I looked at the Victorian desk on my workbench, half restored, beautiful wood emerging from decades of neglect. "Tara, I haven't been a judge for 3 years. I have no influence with the Attorney General's office. But you must know someone. Please, Dad, I'm begging you." "Do you remember last February?" I interrupted. "You came over on a Sunday. Brought those expensive cookies from the bakery downtown. You said you were sorry we hadn't been spending time together." Silence on the other end. "I was so happy to see you. My daughter, finally coming back into my life. I'd have given you anything that day. You know what you asked for instead? You asked me to sign estate planning documents. Papers that would give you control of my house. Dad, that's not... The last 6 months, every visit, every conversation, you were building towards stealing my home. You brought Kevin into my house, let him wander through my office, probably showed him where I kept my documents and my SIL. All of it was preparation for this." Her breathing was ragged now, crying real tears for possibly the first time since childhood. "And now you want my help? Now that Kevin's scheme is collapsing, and you're both facing consequences?" "We're your family," she sobbed. "No, Tara. Family doesn't try to leave each other homeless. Family doesn't forge documents and lie and manipulate. You made your choice when you decided my house was worth more than our relationship. Please. I understand now why you visited so often these past months. You were looking for documents for Kevin, helping him plan how to steal from me." I paused, let the words settle. "I'm sorry, Tara. I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you needed, but I won't help you avoid the consequences of what you've done." I ended the call. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, but from something else. Grief, maybe, for the daughter I thought I had, who'd never really existed. The phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail. And again, and again. Finally, I turned it off and went back to work on the desk, sanding away the damage, finding the beauty underneath. 5 days later, Curtis Ryder filed a countersuit That was brazenly desperate. Gerald called me the moment he received the notification. You need to see this. Riders claiming you psychologically manipulated Tara for years, forced her to care for you through guilt, and that the quitclaim deed was her way of claiming compensation for unpaid caregiver work. That's absurd. Completely. But it's also clever. They're trying to flip the narrative, make you the abuser and themselves the victims. They're claiming $120,000 in damages for emotional distress and uncompensated labor. The lawsuit was a masterpiece of fiction. According to Ryder's filing, I was a controlling, manipulative father who'd forced Tara to visit regularly, demanded she help with household tasks, and used emotional blackmail to keep her trapped in a caregiver role she never wanted. They're also producing witnesses, Gerald continued, his tone darkening. 2 of your neighbors, Daniel and Patricia Morrison, they're prepared to testify that they witnessed you being verbally harsh with Tara, that she often seemed distressed after visiting you. I thought about the Morrisons, a couple in their 50s who lived 3 houses down. I'd met them twice, maybe 3 times in passing. Friendly enough, but hardly close. Kevin got to them, I said, almost certainly. They were probably dream chain investors he's desperate to keep quiet. A little pressure, a few promises. Testify for me and I'll make sure you get your money back. Standard witness, tampering but hard to prove. Can this actually work? Gerald was quiet for a moment. In most cases, no. But judges sometimes have blind spots around elder abuse. There's a tendency to view older people as potentially controlling or difficult. If Ryder can create enough doubt, paint you as an overbearing father, he might convince Judge Hudson that there's ambiguity in the situation. What do? We fight back with facts, and we need to do it quickly. The main hearing is in 10 days. That afternoon, Gerald filed a response denying all allegations and requesting discovery of the Morrisons' financial relationship with Kevin. Simultaneously, Veronica went to work. 2 days later, she delivered exactly what we needed. Phone records, she said, spreading printouts across my dining table. Obtained legally through the court order related to the Securities Commission investigation. Kevin and Tara's cell phones for the past 3 months. She pointed to a highlighted conversation from 6 weeks prior. Kevin, once we get the house, we need to move fast. Sell it before he can fight back. Tara, what about Dad? Where does he go? Kevin, who cares? Nursing home in the Panhandle. Cheapest place we can find. He won't even know the difference in a few years. Tara, that seems harsh. Kevin, he's old, babe. This is what happens. We get our money, he gets taken care of. Everybody wins. Tara, I guess you're right. I read it 3 times, each time feeling like I was seeing a stranger. This was my daughter, the girl I'd raised, loved, supported, casually discussing dumping me in a nursing home in one of the poorest regions of Texas so she could steal my life savings. There's more, Veronica said, flipping to another page. Conversations between Kevin and Daniel Shaw, that consultant who teaches elder fraud. Shaw was coaching Kevin on exactly how to manipulate the legal system, how to forge documents, even how to make the theft look legitimate. Gerald reviewed everything with the careful attention of a prosecutor preparing for trial. This destroys their countersuit completely. They're not victims. They're calculating criminals who planned this for months. File it with the court? Immediately. But there's something else we should consider. Gerald leaned forward. The Attorney General's office is building their securities fraud case against Kevin. This evidence would strengthen their case significantly. With your permission, I'd like to share these phone records with the prosecutor. I thought about the 14 people Kevin had defrauded. Doctors, lawyers, small business owners who'd trusted him with their savings. Robert Meyer, the retired prosecutor, who'd invested $75,000. They deserved justice, too. Do it. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. A text message appeared. Drop the lawsuit or you'll regret it. We know where you live. I stared at the message for a long moment. It was clumsy, desperate, the kind of threat someone makes when they're out of options. Kevin or Tara, or maybe someone they'd convinced to help them. I forwarded the message to Gerald and Veronica, then called the non-emergency police line to report it. The officer who took my statement was professional and thorough, creating a paper trail that would become evidence if anything happened. Then I double-checked my door locks, turned on the exterior security lights I'd installed 30 years ago, and went to bed. They were desperate now, backed into a corner with no way out. The preliminary hearing had shown them their forgery case was doomed. The Securities Commission investigation threatened Kevin with prison. My refusal to help Tara had eliminated their last hope of escaping consequences. Desperate people do dangerous things, but I'd spent 3 decades watching desperate people in courtrooms, seeing how they reacted when the walls closed in. Kevin and Tara were following a predictable pattern: denial, anger, bargaining, threats. The main hearing was now just 2 days away. All the evidence was compiled, all the witnesses prepared. Gerald had built an airtight case that would not only invalidate the forged deed, but potentially send both Kevin and Tara to prison. I sat in my workshop that night, putting the final coat of polish on the Victorian desk. The restoration was almost complete. What had been damaged and neglected was now beautiful again. Some things could be restored, some things couldn't. I thought about my daughter and felt a weight I couldn't quite name. Not anger anymore, not even disappointment. Just a profound sadness for what we'd both lost. Her to greed, me to the realization that the person I thought I knew had never really existed. But the sadness didn't paralyze me. If anything, it clarified my resolve. Justice wasn't about revenge or satisfaction. It was about ensuring that actions had consequences, that the legal system worked the way it was designed to work. In 2 days, everyone would see exactly how well it could work when you had truth on your side. The morning of the main hearing arrived with the kind of clarity that makes everything feel sharper, more real. I dressed in my best suit again, tied my tie the way I'd done 1,000 times before court appearances, and looked at myself in the mirror, 68 years old, retired judge, fighting his own daughter in court. But I didn't feel old. I felt ready. Gerald picked me up at 8, his briefcase packed with everything we'd need: documents, expert testimonies, phone records, financial statements, the complete story of Kevin and Tara's attempt to steal my life. "Courtroom's going to be packed," he said as we drove. "The Dream Chain investigation has made this case somewhat notorious. Local reporters will be there." "Good. Let them see how the legal system handles fraud." The Travis County Courthouse was exactly as I remembered: high ceilings, marble floors, the weight of justice hanging in the air. We walked through security, past familiar hallways where I'd once presided over similar cases, never imagining I'd be the plaintiff in one. The courtroom was indeed packed. I recognized several faces, some of Kevin's Dream Chain investors, drawn by the connection between the cases. The Morrisons sat near the back, the neighbors Kevin had convinced to testify against me, both looking uncomfortable now that they understood the full scope of what they'd been drawn into. Kevin and Tara sat at the defendant's table with Curtis Ryder. Kevin's expensive suit couldn't hide how thin he'd gotten, the stress etched into his face. Tara wouldn't look at me, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. Judge Hudson entered, and we all stood. When he gavelled the session to order, the room fell silent with an intensity I'd rarely experienced. "This is the main hearing in Garrett versus Morgan," Hudson began. "We're here to determine the validity of a quitclaim deed and address countersuit allegations. Mr. Ryder, you may present your case." Ryder stood, and I had to admire his audacity. Despite the preliminary hearing's disaster, despite the mounting criminal investigation, he came out swinging. "Your Honor, my clients are victims of a tragic family misunderstanding. Kevin and Tara Morgan tried to help an elderly father navigate complex estate planning. In return, they've been subjected to harassment, false accusations, and now this baseless lawsuit." He produced photographs, Tara and me at her wedding, at her college graduation, at various family events over the years. In each one, we looked happy together, a loving father and daughter. "These are not the images of an abusive relationship," Ryder continued. "These are evidence of a family bond that Mr. Garrett is now attempting to weaponize against his own daughter." It was a clever move, trying to appeal to emotion over evidence. But I'd seen this tactic before: present the relationship people want to believe in, hope it overshadows the facts. The Morrisons testified briefly, offering vague statements about seeing Tara upset after visits, about me seeming stern in passing interactions. Their testimony was weak, reluctant, and Gerald's cross-examination exposed that Kevin had helped them with investment advice just weeks before. Then it was Gerald's turn. He didn't start with emotion, he started with mathematics. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, a forensic document analysis conducted by Thomas Wheeler, certified examiner with 28 years of experience. Gerald projected the report onto the courtroom screen. Mr. Wheeler's analysis conclusively demonstrates that the signature on the quitclaim deed was forged. The pressure points, the pen strokes, the letter formations, all inconsistent with Mr. Garrett's authentic signature. Probability of forgery, 97%. The report filled the screen, showing side-by-side comparisons. Even to untrained eyes, the differences were obvious. Exhibit B, sworn testimony from Lisa Patterson, the notary whose seal appears on the document. Ms. Patterson's records show she notarized a power of attorney on the date in question, not a quitclaim deed. Someone substituted documents after notarization or forged her seal entirely. Gerald methodically built the case, brick by brick. The outdated seal design, the timeline inconsistencies, Kevin's $500,000 in debt from his fake investment scheme, the meetings with potential home buyers while the property was supposedly still mine, Tara's illegal use of my address as collateral for credit cards. Then came the phone records. Exhibit H, legally obtained recordings of conversations between the defendants. Gerald's voice was calm, almost clinical. I'll play an excerpt from a call made 6 weeks ago. Kevin's voice filled the courtroom. Once we get the house, we need to move fast. Sell it before he can fight back. Tara, oh, what about Dad? Where does he go? Kevin, who cares? Nursing home in the Panhandle. Cheapest place we can find. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I watched Kevin's face drain of color. Tara put her head in her hands. Even Ryder looked like he'd been gut-punched. These are not confused children trying to help an aging parent, Gerald said quietly. These are criminals who planned, for months, to defraud Mr. Garrett of his home and his dignity. They forged documents. They manipulated notaries. They consulted with a specialist in elder fraud. And when they succeeded, they planned to abandon Mr. Garrett in the cheapest facility they could find. Judge Hudson called a 20-minute recess. I watched Kevin and Tara huddle with Ryder, saw the panic in their whispered conversation, the way Ryder kept shaking his head. When Hudson returned, his expression was granite. I've reviewed all evidence presented. The forensic analysis is conclusive. The notary testimony is definitive. The phone records are damning. He looked at Kevin and Tara with the kind of cold assessment I'd once delivered from the bench myself. The quitclaim deed, dated April 15th, is hereby declared fraudulent and void. All property rights to 2,847 Oakwood Drive remain with Mr. Sol Garrett. He paused, and the silence was absolute. Furthermore, the evidence presented here demonstrates clear criminal activity, document forgery, fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse. I'm referring all materials to the Travis County District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal prosecution. Countersuit dismissed with prejudice. His gavel came down with finality. As people stood to leave, I remained seated, letting the moment wash over me. Gerald was shaking hands with colleagues, accepting quiet congratulations. Across the aisle, Ryder was gathering papers with hands that trembled slightly. Kevin and Tara stood, and I finally looked at them directly. Kevin's confident swagger was gone entirely. Tara was crying, real tears this time, tears of genuine fear. As they walked toward the courtroom exit, 2 men in suits stepped forward. Detectives from the Economic Crimes Unit. I recognized the type immediately. Kevin Morgan? Tara Morgan? You're under arrest for suspicion of document forgery and fraud. The handcuffs came out. Kevin tried to protest, but his voice cracked. Tara looked back at me one final time as they led her away, her expression a mixture of shock, betrayal, and the dawning realization that this was really happening. I stood and walked out of the courthouse with Gerald, into the bright Austin sunshine. We won, Gerald said simply. We proved the truth, I corrected. The system did the rest. 6 weeks later, the sentencing hearing brought everything to its final conclusion. Kevin Morgan received 4 years in federal prison for securities fraud related to Dream Chain, plus 2 additional years for the document forgery and attempted fraud against me. 6 years total, with mandatory restitution of $520,000 to his victims. I watched him receive the sentence with what I can only describe as a collapse. His shoulders sagged, his head dropped, and when they led him away in shackles, he looked 20 years older than the confident con artist who'd stood in my yard shouting about taking my house. Tara's sentence was different. 18 months probation with 300 hours of community service and mandatory participation in a rehabilitation program for financial crimes. The judge noted her cooperation and lesser role, but his words were harsh. You betrayed your father's trust in the most profound way possible. You helped facilitate an attempt to leave him homeless and destitute. That this court shows leniency is a mercy you did not extend to your own parent. She took it silently, tears streaming down her face. I felt something watching her, not satisfaction exactly, but a kind of sad completion. This was what justice looked like. Not revenge, not cruelty, but consequences fitting the crime. Curtis Ryder, the aggressive attorney who'd tried every dirty trick in the book, faced a Bar Association investigation for ethical violations. Word was he'd likely lose his license. Turned out threatening elderly plaintiffs and suborning perjury carried professional consequences. That evening I sat on my front porch on Oakwood Drive, watching the sun set over Austin. My house, my home, exactly where it had been 4 months ago when this all started, but somehow feeling more solid, more real. A car pulled up. Marcus Wade, the deputy sheriff who delivered that eviction notice what felt like a lifetime ago. Mr. Garrett, he said, walking up to the porch. I wanted to stop by. I've been following the case. Deputy Wade, or should I say Detective Wade? I'd heard he'd passed his exam. He smiled. Not yet. Few more months. But about that morning, I wanted to apologize. Marcus, you were doing your job. You did it professionally and correctly. When you saw something was wrong, you didn't ignore it. That's exactly what a good law enforcement officer does. We talked for a while, about his career plans, about the case, about how fraud cases often have human costs beyond the financial. He was a good kid, would make an excellent detective. After he left, I went to my workshop in the garage. The Victorian writing desk sat there, finally complete. I'd finished the restoration the day after the trial ended. The wood gleamed under the workshop lights, beautiful and functional, ready for another century of use. Some things could be restored, some things couldn't. I thought about Tara, not the adult who'd tried to steal from me, but the child who'd once asked me how judges know who's telling the truth. You pay attention to the details, I told her. Where had that child gone? When had she become someone who could plan to leave her father in a cheap nursing home while she fled to Europe on stolen money? The questions had no good answers. 3 weeks after sentencing, a letter arrived. Prison postmark, Tara's handwriting. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter unopened in front of me for a long time. Finally, I read it. It was 4 pages of apologies, explanations, justifications, regrets. She blamed Kevin's influence. She blamed her own greed. She blamed the stress of debt and the fear of poverty. She said she understood now what she'd done, how wrong it was, how deeply she'd betrayed me. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I read it twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in the desk drawer where I kept important documents. The letter sat there alongside the court judgments, the property deed with my name on it, all the evidence of justice served. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday we'd have the conversation she wanted, about forgiveness and redemption and moving forward, but not today. I walked back to my workshop and picked up a new project, an antique bookshelf from the 1920s that needed refinishing. The wood was damaged, the joints loose, but underneath I could see the quality craftsmanship. It would take months of careful work to restore it properly. I had the time. I had my home. I had my peace. Justice, I'd learned during 30 years on the bench, isn't about revenge or cruelty. It's about balance, ensuring that actions have appropriate consequences, that the system works fairly for everyone, that truth matters more than manipulation. I'd spent my career trying to achieve that balance for others. These past months, I'd fought to achieve it for myself. Standing in my workshop, running my hand over the old bookshelf's damaged surface, I felt something settle inside me. Not happiness exactly, there was too much loss for that, but satisfaction, completion, the sense that everything had unfolded exactly as it should. Kevin was in prison, Tara was learning consequences. My house remained mine. The 14 Dream Chain investors would receive at least partial restitution. The legal system had worked the way it was designed to work. Justice isn't revenge, I said quietly to the empty workshop. It's when everyone gets what they deserve, and I got mine. My house, my peace, my dignity. I picked up the sandpaper and got to work. The bookshelf wouldn't restore itself, and I had nothing but time. Life, as it always does, moved forward. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.